Hello and welcome to this exploring session, and today we are looking at some more Lord Mayor's shows. In fact, we are going to the earliest texts of Lord Mayor's shows that we have, as well as some background detail about how they function. We have done one video so far on another Lord Mayor show further down the line in the 17th century, but we're doing three from the end of the 16th, and hopefully we'll be filling in lots of interesting details that we hope you will enjoy and will find amusing and innovating as well. We are going to be filling in those details with this wonderful team that we have here, who are going to be reading random selections and also saying hopefully interesting and exciting things as we go. It's been a long day. I feel I'm rambling. So without further ado, reading today we have Alex. Introduce yourself.
I'm Alex Scott Fairley. I'm an actor and I live in the Highlands of Perthshire in Scotland.
And also reading Liza. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Liza. I'm an actor and I'm in London.
And Tracey, introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Tracey. I'm not an actor and I'm not in London, I wish I was. I'm an academic. I work on civic pageantry and I live in Bath.
There may be. We obviously aren't actually sponsored, I should point out. But Tracey has written a book, Pageantry and Power, a cultural history of the early modern Lord Mayor's show, which is sort of our Bible here. So it's lovely having her on the team. So also, finally, Greg, introduce yourself.
How do I follow that? Hi, I'm Greg. I'm not a professional actor either, and I'm based near Stratford-on-Avon.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton, and I'm now slightly worried that YouTube will treat this as sponsored product video. So we'll see how that pans out in the edit later. So without further ado, we are going to dip into the year, into the 1580s. And we're going to start with a journey through England and Scotland made by Lupold von Wedel in the years 1584 and 1585, or as I've put it in the document, What I Did on My Holidays by Wedel, 44 3/4. Bless his cotton socks. He, as we've just been discussing how German he could be at the time, he's about as German as it gets. He went on holiday, as it were, to London. He then nipped up to Scotland, and then he came back down to London again. And while he was there, he caught the Lord Mayor's show. And that's the first text of which we are going to be leaping to in a moment. And it's rather fun. We're going to start with a few elements that are the days before. I just want to throw in as a little bit of warm-up, as it were. We're going to go paragraph by paragraph as well. When we get into the longer sequences. I feel before we actually talk about Lord Mayor shows, very briefly, Tracey, if you could just give us a very, very brief overview. What is a Lord Mayor show and how does one find one?
Well, these days you hang out in London around about the 9th of November, although possibly not this year. But in our period, the 29th of October, the Feast of St. Simon and St. Jude, or the day after rather, which von Wedel mentions, was the inauguration of the new Lord Mayor of London, who served for a year, elected by his peers, the aldermen. Very, very important figure, both in terms of the government of the city, but also nationally. Had to be a member of the Great 12 Livery Companies, and as the 16th century wore on, it became more and more the case that you had this lavish kind of procession and pageantry and music and fireworks and that kind of thing, and dramatists started to get involved. So this is where George Peele comes in.
Yes, our first text is from the 1585 pageant is by George Peele, who has a bit of a family relationship with Lord Mayor's shows. Was his father involved? I seem to recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, James Peele. Yeah, he produced some text in the he worked on the shows behind the scenes rather than there are no texts in the 1560s, good old late 1560s. He was the clerk of Christ's Hospital in London and member of the Salters Company, as was George Peele.
Oh,
He wrote a couple of accountancy books.
I'm guessing Christ's Hospital had a fool called John, or they gave sanctuary to a child called John who was an innocent, right?
Oh.
He was called John in the hospital. He wore or blue coat John because they wore blue coats. And he's one of the fools that Robert Armin writes about in Fool Upon Fool.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's interesting. They clearly did some playing. I'm starting to kind of see evidence of them being the boys from Christ's Hospital, but actually coming to Livery Company Halls and performing. So
Wow.
there's more work to be done there. Definitely, it's not an institution that anyone's paid much attention to in terms of theatre. Actually,
Yeah. In Armin's comedy Two Maids of Mortlake, John is actually a character, and then one of the other clowns, who's also played by Armin, disguises himself as John. So Armin plays both John and the other clown disguised as John.
Right, I'm going to make a note.
Do.
And we haven't even started yet.
Lovely.
That's what I like to hear. So we're going to go round the room with this what von Wedel saw in his holidays, but it's a couple of days before the 29th when everything kicks off. So he's been on his holidays. So Alex, could you just read what happened on the 19th?
On the 19th, we returned to London on the river, 21 miles.
Oh, isn't that nice? On the 26th, what happened, Liza?
On the 26th, Ewald Goltze left for home. I remained here during the winter.
Lovely. Tracey, on the 27th, what did he do?
I'm not going to do a German accent. On the 27th, Parliament being assembled in London, I went to the House, which is a pretty large palace. I saw the Lord Chancellor and the other gentlemen sitting in council, which looks very stately for all of them when they go to Parliament, or when they sit in council with others of their kin, wear their old-fashioned coats, which hang down to the ground.
I like descriptions of this kind of thing. I've read the old-fashioned coats.
He likes clothes very much.
Yeah. He's keen on that. So yes, went to the House, which that should be capitalized. I should point out this is a translation from the 19th century. So I think off the top of my head. So I cannot affirm precisely how accurate the translation is of what he says. However, the next day, having had a little look at Parliament, on the 28th, read the first paragraph, would you please, Greg?
On the 28th, being the day of St. Simon and St. Jude, a new mayor or burgomaster was chosen. This ceremony takes place every year on the same day and in the following manner. The mayor in office goes to the town hall, followed by the new candidate. They both wear long coats of a brownish violet coloured cloth, lined with marten, and over those other coats of the same colour, faced with calabar skins, the latter hanging down on the back and turned up on the sides. On their heads they wear black caps, and a sceptre and sword were carried before them.
Alex, take up the thread.
After them marched 24 councillors clad in the same manner, and in the town hall stood 48 men, 24 on each side, in long black coats also lined with marten, wearing on their backs large bags or hoods like those which in Germany the shepherds use, of cloth half red, half black, with a bandolier of the same colours over the shoulder and fastened before the chest. When the council has reached the platform, the present burgomaster and the one which is to come are seated behind a small table, and then the mace-bearer advises 3 times all present to pay attention. Then he takes a book, and he and another gentleman, kneeling down on cushions placed on both sides of the table, they read the oath which the new mayor has to swear. When this is done, a book bound in red velvet with gilt edges is handed by another person, together with the seal, sword, and sceptre, to the new mayor.
And Liza, last paragraph, please.
After this ceremony, they all go out again, but now the late mayor following the newly elected. Before going out, the 2 mayors and council had taken off their overcoats faced with calabar, keeping on only those lined with marten, over which they had large gold chains hanging down in the front and on the back as far as the girdle. The Queen gives such a chain to every new elected burgomaster. The members of the town council who have been elected mayors once before wear likewise such chains. The other have only stripes of black velvet on their coats about a hand's breadth broad. The two mayors, as well as the council, left on horseback, also two secretaries who rode behind the council. They were clad in similar coats as before said, wearing golden chains beneath their coats. The men with the coloured bags marched before and accompanied the new mayor to his house.
And there ends the section on the 28th, the day before. There is always an interesting question, as I don't know whether you know the answer to this, Tracey, but are there any obvious errors that we know that he's wrong about, or is he relatively bang on the money? One always...
Well, I was actually going to say, this is a very, very rare description of the ceremony that takes place before the inaugural day. And so... we have very, I mean, obviously we can compare it to what happens nowadays, although it's very, very secretive about that ceremony, actually, in the city. But we don't know because it's really unusual. Von Wedel's got this habit of kind of getting himself into the places where things are happening, even if he's not actually supposed to be there. He has a rummage around the kitchens in the Guildhall at some point later on. So yeah, this is very unusual and really interesting account of very much the kind of private ceremony that took place before the big show the next day. I'm just going to share something with you. Oh, you can't do it. Let me just share it. I'll put it on the chat. There's a picture from Lord Mayor's show about 6 years ago, which shows some of the figures that Von Wedel is talking about, because of course nothing's changed. So I'll just stick that up.
Yeah, he is. You're absolutely right. He's absolutely obsessed with costume, isn't he? You know, describing everything there. You know, he is a costume scout's dream, really, isn't he? You know, trying to prep. If you wanted to recreate this, you'll be scouring that for details that are, you know, absolutely fab.
Any minute now, you'll be able to see the sword bearer and mace bearer, and the sword bearer wearing his cat of squirrel fur. Which Von Wedel, I think, later on gets very puzzled about what the hell he's wearing. But yeah, but in that respect, nothing has changed.
You know, it's very specific numbers that he's using. I like the fact the mace bearer advises 3 times all present to pay attention. Shut up 3 times. Always wise. They read the oath. Do we have an access to the kind of oaths they would be saying, or has that changed, or is that still available?
I would be very surprised if it's changed.
Excellent. That's
I don't know from my own personal experience, the oaths that you swear when you become a freeman of the city has not changed really. So, and this is much more important. So.
Excellent. That's saying we can look as a resource in the future as well. That I like. So, any additional thoughts from the room about what happened the day before?
Can I just ask, when you said that this comes from a translation from the 19th century, does the original still exist, and that's just a later translation, or do we only have it in a translation from later on?
No idea, actually. I just simply, this was the most available resource that I could get to hand.
Really good question.
Because I'd be really interested to read the original if it does exist. I mean, obviously German has changed, so I would struggle with some of it, but I'd be really interested to read the original.
I'll try and find it out, and I'll let Rob know, and he can let you know.
Yeah, I would really like to compare and contrast, because that would be, you know, that'd be great. Anything else before we go on to the day itself? Describe the day before we actually get to what the script says the day is like.
Can I ask another question, which might be a stupid question? Is there a significance with? I know that Jude is the patron saint of hopeless causes, I think, but is there a significance? It's all I know about St. Jude. Is there a significance that it takes place on that day? That's a religious one, or is it just traditional?
It's definitely traditional. I'm not aware of any, because there were so many feast days. Obviously, the Lord Mayor's been inaugurated on this date from the 12th century. So, you know, when there were a lot more feast days than there were in the 16th century. It's traditional, really. It's also it's timed quite helpfully because the Lord Mayor was elected at Michaelmas, so the end of August. So that gave them a couple of months to prepare.
Great.
Okay, we're going to go into the day itself. I forget where we got to.
I think it was Tracey next reading.
Tracey next. So we'll probably stop and start at every few stanzas, or stanzas, paragraphs. The paragraphs I don't think are original. I think I probably just put them in, so they may not be helpful, but we'll see. But just to break it up again, and as we come to any interesting thoughts about that, obviously until you compare it with the text of the show itself, we may find discrepancies. I don't know. I've no idea. So on the 29th, Tracey.
Okay. On the 29th, the said mayor, together with members of the council, proceeded by the river Thames, from the Stalhof to Westminster and to the courts of law. The barge they used was covered with red taffetas ornamented with the white cross. It was followed by many barges filled with mechanics or members of guilds. The men with the coloured bags, hoods, that I had seen yesterday were also present. They were the masters of different guilds. Each guild or company had its own barge, ornamented by numerous flags by which each company might be distinguished one from the other.
Greg.
A very large barge, painted black and white, was called the Apprentices Barge. This barge is uncovered. Besides these, on the river were numerous little boats, altogether several hundred in number, carrying people who wanted to see the splendid spectacle. When the mayor stepped into the barge, a salute of more than 100 shots was fired, trumpets and musical instruments were heard from all the barges, and there was great rejoicing on the river as far as Westminster. When the mayor left the barge, a procession marched before him, headed by the men bearing the coloured bags, hoods, and some trumpeters. After these followed more than 200 men and the sergeants, each of the latter bearing in his hand the Queen's arms in the form of a seal, but broader.
So we'll just briefly stop there. So I think in the text of it says Stalhof. Is that Guildhall? I'm assuming that's because that's where they usually start. So they usually start at the Guildhall. They head down to the river, get on the barges, and off they go. More than 100 shots were fired. Trumpets, musical instruments were heard from all the barges. This is noisy stuff, people.
I'm thinking of the Queen. I can't remember what happens on the mayor's one, but I remember the Queen's river procession a few years ago, and I'm thinking that was noisy enough.
Yeah,
they had cannons going off from Lambeth on the other side of the river as well.
Wow.
So yeah, and there was the galley foist was a kind of smaller, more sort of movable boat than the barges, and that had musicians and cannon on it as well. So in the river there was also, and the barges had musicians too. So yeah, it would have been absolute mayhem. But in a good way.
I like the very large barge painted black and white was called the Apprentices Barge. It's what was the other bit that the various guilds having a different barge. What was the bit that leapt out at me? Thoughts from other people while I try and figure out what the hell I'm saying. Who wants to leap in? No, nobody's got anything. That's fine.
I'm trying to find a picture of a livery company banner actually, because I've got one. But I'll just stick on the thingy so you can all see it.
I like the idea of spectators in their own little boats. I guess the watermen must have done a brisk business on the day.
Yeah, they will have done, absolutely.
Probably had to book a waterman ages in advance. Then if you actually wanted to get anywhere by water, you can't, because they're all down at the show.
Yeah.
So people made a lot of money out hiring out windows if they lived on the route, houses on the route. So yeah, same applies to the river, I'm sure.
It's amazing. He's painted with very few words. He's painted the most vivid picture already of this, with that image of the boats. Even just the boats idea, you think, wow, yeah.
And we haven't even got the text that we'll be looking at in a moment. It's that question. It's a weird translation question, presumably about the coloured bags or hoods. I'm assuming it means hoods, but he wrote bags. Is that? I'm slightly confused by that point.
I guess, yeah, that is a bit of a weird one actually, but yeah, I think so. Must be that. Martin, by the way, is pine martin or foins, which is the fine for the kind of the higher level members of the companies for.
They're sort of reddish, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, if you were kind of a bog standard member of the company, at Webb, which is basically sheep's wool.
So all of the clothing he described the day before, is that still the sort of the same sort of outfits for this day as well?
Yeah, if you look at the picture I put up of the contemporary show, not the one I've just put up as the banner from one of the companies, but the one before that, you can see that the costumes and the kind of the accessories and so on are really very much the same.
Okay. Right. Okay. We're going to go to the next paragraph. We've just had. They've just got back off the boat. They've headed off to Westminster for the official business of the day. Have they come back from Westminster, or is this the bit at Westminster? I don't know how he's following. You see, I'm quite curious where he is in this whole melee of things.
I think they're on the way down, aren't they?
Yeah, I think we still are on the way to Westminster.
So he left the barge, a procession marched before him with all the people, followed by 200 men, bearing in his hand the Queen's arms in form of a seal, but broader. Alex, if you pick up the thread.
Everybody whom they touch with them must follow them upon pain of death. Then followed a good number of men with white staffs, 16 trumpeters and 4 pipers. After these, 2 men, each bearing an incense box on a white staff, and then came the man with the sword, wearing a broad and high open cap of fur. Now followed the 2 mayors. Behind these, the council, in the same order as yesterday, but in red coats. The 2 burgomasters were clad in the same coats. Then followed 70 men with spears, clad at the expense of the burgomaster in blue coats and broad red caps, all of the same pattern, according to the English fashion. Now followed the whole population, entering the courthouse in a crowd, men as well as women, for the English women want to be present on all such occasions. Now that in Germany.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that. Everyone whom they touch with them must follow them upon pain of death. I mean, I assume it's an exaggeration on his part, but or someone told him that. You know, what is this thing going on here? Yeah, mate, if you have to follow pain of death, mate. Yeah.
Well, I assume there are people at the front of the crowd being like, "Ooh, pick me, pick me."
Yeah.
And the women, obviously.
Yeah, so
I think this is something that von Wedel has either made up or someone's told him.
Yeah.
It's just
no,
not really, mate.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird. I mean, I like it, but it's weird, and I don't know what's going on. So, yeah. Again, I think we can trust him on the costuming. And scratch what I said just now. We got lots of detail about what they're wearing at that moment. And they're all entering the courthouse in a crowd, men as well as women. God. So, Liza, pick up how what it's like in the building.
Though the place was very large, there was no possibility to move. The burgomaster and the council mounted some steps, and swore the oath to the Chancellor of State, who acted as the Queen's deputy. When this was over, I and my companions left the place, went down the river in a boat, and took our way to the town hall, where yesterday the mayor had sworn to the town. Here 60 tables were placed, each 15 or 20 paces long, all well arranged. Some steps higher up, some more tables were arranged in the same manner, and again a few steps higher, behind a curtain, we saw the mayor's table arranged in stately manner, where he was to sit with deputies of the Queen and council.
Yes, I like this. It was really, really busy, so I left. You know, so
Fair.
couldn't see anything. Stuff was happening. I've been to gigs like that. He's really keen on he likes detailing these really quite mundane things, but it's really great. 60 tables, 15 or 20 paces long, well arranged. All these details.
So
and you can,
these
feels like he's
tables
asked someone as well, and that's where the deputies of the Queen and the Council will sit. He's like he's talking to someone in the room while he's making notes or something.
So the tables are in the town hall. Does he mean the guild hall? Or?
Yeah.
I'd assume so. Yeah. Some of those terms he's using are not quite helpful.
And the mayor's table is behind a curtain, and it's the most awesome table.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've got more information. We're running out of text, I'm afraid. So and we haven't even got to what happens next. So he's still pootling about. Tracey, pick up mid-pootle, please.
Got the kitchens, right? Okay. We were conducted into 2 other rooms, 4 tables being placed in each of them. In the first, we found a great many young ladies dining. In the other, as many married ladies, many of them very fine-looking. Wow. After having seen this, we went to the kitchens. In the first kitchen, meat was roasting on 8 fires. In the second, only boiled dishes were prepared. In the third, pastry of different kinds was made. This banquet is arranged by the mayor. The expense of it is said to amount to £500, £1 being equal to 5 riksdaler. Afterwards, we took our way to the broadest street in London, which is Cheapside, by the way, through which the mayor passes on horseback from the courthouse, procession marching before him as aforesaid. At the head of it, there are some fire engines ornamented with garlands, out of which they throw water on the crowd, forcing it to give way. The streets are quite filled with people.
So, yes, they've sent in the riot police. So yeah, there's some interesting things there. It's always nice to know what £1 being equal to 5 riksdalers. It's always good to have a currency exchange rate stated. It's useful. Yeah, he's really keen on the ladies eating in the other room. That's an interesting detail.
So what? Fire engines?
Yeah, I'm just going to put a picture up. Basically, they have some of the crowd control, and they are carrying squibs, which are actually like kind of fireworks, and they sort of spray the kind of the fireworks out to get people out of the way. So the guy that I've just sent you a picture of, you can see he's carrying a squib, and he's also a Green Man costume, and that's what they would be doing.
That would be your that'd be your whiffler.
So wait, he's meant to be spraying fireworks, or he's meant to be spraying water?
Yeah, fireworks. Fireworks are coming out. It's called a squib. Coming out of the thing he's carrying.
In the Promos and Cassandra scenes that I talked about before we started recording, they're directed to be 2 people dressed as green men with clubs of fireworks, and I had no idea what that would look like, and now I do.
Yes. But it's the addition of water as well. The fire, throw water on the crowd. Is that a confusion? I mean, surely he can't have confused that, can he?
It's possible. I've never seen any reference to water being used, unless this was a particularly unruly year, and they decided they needed to kind of bring every possible thing in. Again, sometimes with these eyewitness accounts from people who aren't from this country, you get the sense that they're trying to make sense of what they can see and kind of make equivalents to what they know at home, and sometimes get it a bit wrong.
Well, it's also the mayor passes on horseback from the courthouse, and I'm sort of wondering I suppose that would be Westminster, won't it? So he would have arrived at the just below St Paul's, made his way up.
He's coming back. He's coming back from the Guildhall after the feast.
Oh, so this is after the feast.
I think so. Unless no, maybe not. But he's coming on Cheapside.
I'm just wondering whether Wedel has just muddled up the order of things here. I'm just because he's been too busy at the feast and he's taking this from other people's accounts.
Yeah, I think it's not, the chronology is not altogether clear, but he's clearly, when he goes on to talk about the pageantry in the next paragraph, that's the kind of the middle part of the day, if you like, after Westminster.
Yeah.
So probably on Cheapside as well, I'd imagine, given that he hasn't said he's gone anywhere else. So yeah, jumping ahead a bit.
Yeah, we're sort of jumping ahead, but we're also sort of jumping back. So it's that confusing thing. It'll become a little clearer when we actually go through the text of the pageant itself and we can talk more about the mechanics and the direction of travel. But yeah, some interesting questions thrown up there. So we're getting to the pageanty bit, shall we say? The theatrical moment. Greg, would you like to read this? Pay attention, everyone. There will be questions later.
Came a person sitting on a fine horse, head, neck, and body being covered with blue taffetas. Then followed 7 flag bearers. 2 flags were long, 5 almost like standards, though of a somewhat different cut. And after these, a military banner, followed by some trumpets. After the trumpets, some men were carrying a representation in the shape of a house, with a pointed roof painted in blue and golden colours and ornamented with garlands, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel, one holding a book, another pair of scales, the third a sceptre. What the others had, I forget.
Which does suggest he was actually there.
I love that last line, that's brilliant.
Well, it's also, we're getting a sense of his interests in life, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel.
Costume and the girls, basically.
He does keep mentioning the ladies. It has to be
But do you know what's extraordinary? I've looked up Lupold von Wedel because I'm now totally engrossed in him and fascinated in him. And he didn't marry until the age of 54, on the 13th of September 1598. So it took him a long time to settle on one lady.
How old was his wife? That's what I wouldn't know.
Well, from this, it suggests that he's been horny for quite a while.
I love the description of the flags too. That sort of all the different lengths. It wasn't just there were 5 flags, 7 flags. Sorry.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting actually comparing some of these details. So, it seems that yes, he was there watching, but he wasn't paying nearly as much attention as he was to who was cooking what in the kitchen and what people were wearing earlier. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he'd been drinking. Who knows? Alex, would you read the next paragraph, please?
Yes. Now came the burgomaster and the council, in the same manner as I have already described, on beautiful and well-ornamented horses, with the guard, trumpets, and pipes, followed by the multitude, fine-looking women among it, which was wonderful to be seen. Thus the mayor entered the council house and held banquet.
Sorry.
I'm sure it was wonderful. It was von Wedel. Yes, it was. I'm sure you were delighted. Yes. Okay. Final paragraph, please.
This done, he went to St. Paul's Church with his suite, making procession round the church while hymns were sung and candles borne before him, after which they conducted him with trumpets and music out of the church. This is the way in which they here elect and confirm their burgomaster or mayor, who is afterwards knighted by the Queen's commissioner. As long as his office lasts, he is obliged to keep open house and free table for everybody, and this makes a great difference between him and the burgomasters in Germany. He and his wife have the title my lord and my lady, as long as they live.
Okay, Tracey, how much of that is true? Because I question a lot of that.
No, it's true. The bit about the free table and an open house is definitely true. It was what was called an office of charge, being Lord Mayor. It's one of the reasons why the city built a mansion house in the 18th century, actually, to make it a bit easier for the Lord Mayor to manage all the banquets and things, to have a kind of, proper venue. So the city also spent a bit of money decorating and doing up the Lord Mayor's house to enable him to be able to use it for these kind of events. In 1621, the Lord Mayor, Michael Francis Jones, a haberdasher, actually scarpered just before his term was up because he basically ran out of money. That doesn't happen very often, but these men were usually extremely wealthy, so it wasn't a massive issue really. But yeah, that's definitely the case.
Does he and his wife have the title of my lord and my lady?
Well, he's knighted, so yes.
Excellent. So I like that. And so we've got to the end of the element. So they do actually go back to St. Paul's after feasting, don't they? So that element is that correct?
Yeah, he's just done that. They go held banquet, then they go for the sermon.
Yeah, I'm just checking his chronology. So that bit seems right.
Yeah, and then the Lord Mayor's usually accompanied by whoever's still standing back to his house with more kind of frolics right at the end of the day.
Okay, that was rather fun. I enjoyed that. All those lovely ladies. So what we're going to now look at is the text that was printed of the device of the pageant, born before Wolstan Dixie. Before we read that, Tracey, anything about Wolstan Dixie that you can tell us briefly? Is he an interesting chap?
No, not really. Sorry. He's not as interesting as Peele, I'm afraid.
Okay, right. Well, we know from...
I put up, one of the pictures I put up a few back, one called 550 PNG, has got some rather weird 19th century versions of the pageant devices for 1616 Lord Mayor's show, and you can see links with somebody riding it in the bottom right-hand corner. So that, that's the same kind of device Peele is using all those years before.
Yes, we're about to get more detail. But he, sadly, Wedel was not very detailed about what the pageant itself was like. But luckily, we have this text, which suggests some things. So let's start with the speech. Stage direction is lovely. A speech spoken by him that rid on a lazern, a lynx, before the pageant, apparelled like a Moor. So who wants to leap in with that? Alex, why don't you do the speech riding a lynx?
From where the sun doth settle in his way, and yokes his horses to his fiery cart, and in his way gives life to Ceres' corn, even from the parching zone, behold, I come, a stranger, strangely mounted, as you see, seated upon a lusty luzern's back, and offer to your honour, good my lord, this emblem thus in show significant. Lo, lovely London, rich and fortunate, famed through the world for peace and happiness, is here advanced and set in highest seat, beautified thoroughly as her state requires. First, over her a princely trophy stands, of beaten gold, a rich and royal arms, whereto this London evermore bequeaths service of honour and of loyalty. Her props are well-advised magistrates that carefully attend her person still. The honest franklin and the husbandman lays down his sacks of corn at London's feet, and brings such presents as the country yields. The pleasant Thames, a sweet and dainty nymph, for London's good conveys with gentle stream, and safe and easy passage what she can, and keeps her leaping fishes in her lap. The soldier and the sailor, frankly both, for London's aid are all in readiness to venture and to fight by land and sea. And this thrice reverent, honourable dame, Science, the sap of every commonwealth, surnamed mechanical or liberal, is vowed to honour London with her skill. And London, by these friends so happy made, first thanks her God, the author of her peace, and next, with humble gesture, as becomes in meek and lowly manner, doth she yield herself, her wealth, with heart and willingness, unto the person of her gracious queen, Elizabeth, renowned throughout the world, stalled and anointed by the highest power, the God of kings that with his holy hand hath long defended her and her England. This now remains, right honourable Lord, that carefully you do attend and keep this lovely lady rich and beautiful, the jewel wherewithal your sovereign queen hath put your honour lovingly in trust, that you may add to London's dignity, and London's dignity may add to yours, that worthily you may be counted one among the number of a many more careful lieutenants, careful magistrates, for London's welfare and her worthiness.
We'll just pause briefly there. So we got a little turned around when we were talking about the procession route earlier, because it wasn't quite clear from what von Wedel was doing. But this is the first element of a pageant starting from around St. Paul's area, or from just coming off the boat, returning from Westminster, heading up to Cheapside, and Cheapside is our principal strip of action, where things are happening. So it's a processionary route, and the procession seems to be led by or introduced to us with this riding chap on a lynx. There, am I about right on that, Tracey?
Yeah, I mean, this was in the days when there was only one pageant, generally speaking, and as you can see, it's peripatetic, so it's conveyed around. In front of or behind, I'm not sure, possibly in front of the Lord Mayor, and then they would stop at places on your wonderful tube map, and then there, things would happen there. But yeah, it's peripatetic. I've just put up on the thingy the original text actually from Peele, if you want to have a look at that. Might be quite interesting.
And there will be links in the show notes so that you can follow along at home for these, because they are available online. So, in a sense, this is setting up the second half of the text, because he's talking about the various elements who are about to stand up and speak and be cute in a moment. But it's all thoughts from the room, actually. I'm not going to tell you what to think. Why should I do that? How did you respond to it? Alex, you were reading it. How did it feel to you?
I think it's a really nice speech. It's really well written compared to sort of what you get at some civic events these days. It's kind of, it feels like it's had some genuine thought put into it. It's, yeah. I love the sort of, I'm not a big fan of London itself, I have to admit, but I sort of love the imagery of kind of the different sort of contributors all contributing to London as the sort of centre of, as the centre of Britain, with Elizabeth, or England with Elizabeth in the middle of it. And I sort of like it as a preamble to sort of what we're about to get. It's nicely written. It was more poetic than I was expecting from some piece of sort of civic.
Well, it's an interesting step up, I think, from the stuff with the royal entries we were looking at last time, which were much patchier and much simpler. This is doing something a bit different. Liza, you were there last time, I think. Thoughts on this one as well? Oh
yeah, I mean, Alex is absolutely right. As a sort of master of ceremonies speech, it's structured really well. It makes me eager to see how they would have costumed these actors. I certainly would like to see what Lady Science would be wearing. Speaking of which, small text note, I've scrolled down a little bit, and below Science's speech, the first nymph speech, I'm pretty sure that should be "These holy lights shall burn."
It should be. Yes, that should have been corrected as well. I don't know why you've got that. I apologise for that. There's more than one bum available. So just point out that is a typo that should have been corrected. I don't know why you've got that. Oh well, never mind. Don't know why I try and keep track. I don't know why I keep track, because I'm obviously failing.
It's a nice thing at the end as well of the kind of the reciprocity that you may add to London's dignity and London's dignity may add to yours. It's very sort of it's very civil, I think, in the best possible sense of that word.
Now the question is the person sitting on the links the person sitting on a fine horse covered in blue taffetas, or is that just part of the procession that von Wedel mentioned earlier?
The horse sounds really specific. I mean, I think it's the horse that's covered in blue taffetas. The horse is wearing a kind of footcloth, and I think if you had something as badass as a lynx to ride on, then I don't think you'd cover it in cloth. Show me a cat who would stand for that, real or stuffed.
Yeah, I'm just working the assumption he missed this bit, and that's just somebody else's horse.
You have a look at the cover of my book, Rob. If you've got that to hand,
Yes.
There it's very similar. And Peele also uses a presenter character who's a Moor riding on lynx in one of his plays at the same time. So
They had a lynx.
Yeah, well, but there's a lot of crossover between the plays that he's doing for the Queen's Men, obviously, and the stuff he's doing for the city. Yeah.
I wonder if the lynx belonged to the Queen's Men. I wonder if the city paid them a higher fee for their prop lynx or something.
I was thinking what play that was, because I'm sure we've done all.
Can't remember off my head.
Yeah, because I'm sure we've done almost all of them. So I'd have thought we'd have come across it, and I thought I would have noted it. We were noting dragons earlier and things and possible overlaps. Yeah, so it's a construction. It's on top of construction. It's not pulled by horses or anything. I'm just wondering who the horse he's talking about in that particular bit was.
The person on a horse sounds like a person of actual high status, whereas the person on the lynx is almost certainly a professional actor.
I would have thought so. And when we're talking about professional actors, that's am I fair in saying that that's probably a bloke, as in an adult, as opposed to who are performing the next sequence, because the people who he was talking about, it does state here, spoken by the children in the pageant. So on the various houses, I suspect, if we're going by what Wedel said, on which sat some young girls in fine apparel, one holding a book, another pair of scales, and a third a sceptre. Whether that is connected directly with what is being said here, we shall see in a moment. So, children in the pageant, Liza first as London, Tracey, and then Greg, and we'll just circle round with all of these lovely children. So, London first.
New Troy I hight, whom Lud my lord surnamed. London, the glory of the western side. Throughout the world is lovely London famed, so far as any sea comes in with tide, whose peace and calm under her royal queen have long been such as like was never seen. Then let me live to carol of her name, that she may ever live and never die. Her sacred shrine set in the house of fame, consecrate to eternal memory, my peerless mistress, sovereign of my peace. Long may she joy with honor's great increase.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Tracey as magnanimity.
Magnanimity. Country in the Thames afford their aid, and careful magistrates their care attend. All English hearts glad and well apaid, in readiness the London to defend. Defend them, Lord, and these fair nymphs likewise, that ever they may do this sacrifice.
And Greg as loyalty.
The greatest treasure that a prince can have doth lovely London offer to her queen, such loyalty as like was never seen, and such as any English heart can crave.
And Alex as the country.
For London's aid the country gives supply of needful things and store of every grain. London, give thanks to him that sits on high, had never town less cause for to complain, and love and serve the sovereign of thy peace, under whose reign thou hast this rich increase.
Liza the Thames.
With silver glide my pleasant streams do run, where leaping fishes play betwixt the shores. This gracious good hath God and kind begun, for London's use with help of sails and oars. London, rejoice, and give thy God the praise, for her whose highness lengthens thy happy days.
And the soldier, Tracey.
Armour of safe defence the soldier hath, so lovely London carefully attends, to keep her sacred sovereign from scath. Okay? That all this London land so well defends, and so far London bids her soldiers go, as well may serve to shield this land from woe.
And the sailor, Greg.
The sailor that in cold and quaking tide the wrathful storms of winter's rage doth bide, with streamers stretched prepares his merry bark, for country's wealth to set his men a walk, that queen and country easily may see the seaman serves his prince in high degree, in his degree.
And Alex, science.
For London's safety and her happiness, the soldier and the sailor may you see, all well prepared and put in readiness, to do such service as may fitting be. And art with them doth join, and they with me. London then joy, and let all ages know, what duty to thy sovereign thou dost owe.
And now we have 4 nymphs, one after the other. Liza, nymph number 1, please.
Thus with the morning sun and evening star these holy lights shall burn. The cheerful flame with sweetest odor shall perfume as far as India stands in honor of her name, whose trophy we adore with sacred rites, with sweetest incense and with endless lights.
And nymph number 2, please, Tracey.
So long as sun doth lend the world his light, or any grass doth grow upon the ground, with holy flame our torches shall burn bright, and fame shall bruit with golden trumpets sound, the honour of our sacred regiment that claims this honourable monument.
And third nymph, Greg.
Our holy light shall burn continually, to signify our duties to her state, whose excellent and high and princely majesty approves itself to be most fortunate.
Fourth nymph, Alex.
Virtue shall witness of her worthiness, and fame shall register her princely deeds. The world shall still pray for her happiness, from whom our peace and quietness proceeds.
And then there's an additional note that verses written under the arms of England. And Liza, I'll be mean and hand that to you.
Good Lord. Tracey has your Latin. I might nominate.
Terrible.
Okay, then I will read it in my terrible Latin, and everyone can laugh. Galaia victa dedit flores invicta leones Anglia, ius bellae in flore leone sum. O sic, o semper ferat Anglia leta triumphos, inclita galorum flore leone suo.
Lovely, and that's done by George Peele, Master of Arts in Oxford, and that's the text that we get. It is not as extensive as we will get much later on. As we go into the 17th century, we start getting quite a lot of text and a lot more data in a sense. How is everyone finding that? I am yet to identify the young girls holding books, scales, and a scepter, but did anyone else manage to detect any of them in there?
Nothing. They would have been some devices that would have been easily recognisable. Nothing jumps out actually.
No.
They might have been the nymphs, possibly.
Yeah, I was focusing on the nymphs at the time, but I just couldn't see that it matched. Unless that, there might be other visual things going on that are not text connected, and that's what he saw. That he didn't really see this element at all.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. The images that I've just put up on the chat thing, by the way, is a very famous street view of Cheapside during a procession. And the second of the two edifices in the middle of the street, not the big one, the one behind it, is the Standard on Cheap. And the figure of Fame at the top there, you can just about see there's a figure with a trumpet. I'm as sure as I can be that they are by the figure of Fame, which was our pageant station while these features are going on. Because they mentioned Fame quite a few times.
Yes, and Fame has a golden trumpet that she blows if you have a good reputation, and also a black one that she blows if your reputation is bad.
Yeah, well, there she is on the Standard, so yeah, that's where they are, I'm sure.
That's a really lovely piece of specificity. I wondered if the scales and the sword and the books, I wondered if you might have got them out of order and whether, science might have the books, but
I'm wondering if it's all on one pageant, as it were. They're all for science, and he only saw one. That's sort of how I'm thinking it, because they're all quite connected. There's nothing really. Is there anything particularly royally anywhere? There's the scepter I wondered about. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Sorry, I keep chucking images at you, but there's a much better quality image of one of the pageant devices in 1616 shown. You can see there's a large number of figures on it. And they are carrying things. and they would doubtless have been children because otherwise it wouldn't be able to carry that number of individuals.
Yes, because the particular pageants that we're talking about here, they're not on carts with they're being carried, aren't they?
Carried by porters, yeah, most definitely.
So it's not like you've got weight here that has to be carried by brute force.
How many is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 figures, which is standard actually. No doubling, obviously. That's quite a lot of individuals for to be carried around the streets of London. So children obviously have great advantages there.
The disadvantage, of course, when you're doing a large-scale event with lots of explosive devices going on and lots of music, is nobody could hear the buggers a lot of the time.
Well, it depends what instruments you use. There are specifically loud instruments for parades and public places. Woodwinds, reeds, brass, shawms, trumpets, things that go honk. And drums, of course.
Well, Wedel does seem to go for the honking. Mostly he's describing trumpets and pipes. Any additional thoughts about just the text that we've just had? Lovely London, lovely. It's lovely. It's London.
It's very harmonious. The picture Peele is painting here, actually. But certainly, when you get later into the 17th century, you get a lot more, warning the Lord Mayor it's going to be damn hard, and he's sort of watching out for people trying to bribe and that kind of stuff. You don't get any sense of that. It's all the loveliness of lovely, isn't it?
Yes, and I love the thought of these lovely harmonious verses being spoken among a crowd that's basically like barfing down each other's trousers.
Yes, we haven't had mention here. I mean, last time when we were in Coventry, the wine was flowing from the conduits quite excessively. Is that happening in Lord Mayor shows as well? Do we not get that?
The Royal Entry. You would have come to the Royal Entry, okay? You could be alive in 1558, or you have to wait to 1604. Sorry.
Oh well, never mind. I'd like differences for different things. Any additional thoughts then on this particular pageant in 1585? Any general thoughts about this particular event? No, I hear beautiful silence. Okay, we're going to jump forward in time. 5 years. We don't, unfortunately, have the pageants in between. We have all we have. I don't think we have any major additional sources to go with this one. This is 1590, and it's not by Peele. It's not by Peele this time. But we do have some more magical creatures to be ridden on, which I'm sure you will all enjoy. So this is the device of the pageant set forth by the worshipful company of the fishmongers for the Right Honourable John Allot. Do we know anything about him?
Not a lot.
Oh, thank you very much, Liza. Established Lord Mayor of London and the Mayor of the Staple for this present year of our Lord, 1590. This is by Thomas Nelson. Just see a T. I'm suddenly.
Yeah. It's a bit of a mystery, really. Every now and again, they throw these sort of random individuals and think, who the hell's that? Like John Squire in 1620. Like, okay. We don't know much about him. He was a printer, I think, stationer. Produced a couple of other texts, but I don't know why he got the job. He must have known someone.
Okay, let's go into this text. So once again, we've reversed ourselves back to the vicinity of St. Paul's. We're on Cheapside. We're heading towards the Guildhall. Again, this speech is to be spoken by him that rideth on the merman. Greg, you look like a merman rider.
Attend, my lord, and mark the tale I tell, whose form you see is monstrous, strange, and rare. Before a man-like shape behind a fish's fell, his strange disguise doth make full many stare. And since they And since they please to know why I come here, let them be still, the cause shall soon appear. Within this commonwealth, my lord, all those ye live in awe do seek each day for to perform and keep the established law. Yea, such do keep ye Sabbath day in reverence as they ought, and fish days too, as well as flesh, which many set at naught. Yet if the same were well observed, flesh seldom would be dear, and fish abound at each man's board, more plenty in each year. Then England's store would be increased with butter, cheese, and beef, and thousands set to work for fish that now beg for relief. This shape so strange show they are strange, and do digress from reason, that shunning eating fish and flesh to keep both time and season, which fault reformed, our commonwealth would flourish in such wise as never any did behold the like with mortal eyes.
And now the speech spoken by him that rideth on the unicorn. Liza, you look like a unicorn rider.
Thank you, Rob. That's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever... O worthy city, now rejoice in Christ, for through his grace with peace he hath thee blessed. He sends thee still such godly magistrates as daily seeks to keep thee from unrest. Muse not, my lord, to see the sun doth shine on England's peace who sits in princely throne. It doth presage her sunshine still shall last, and make her foes afeard at every blast. So long as peace directed is by truth, and God's pure word receive it as it ought, so long the Lord will bless this little land, and make it flow with plenty in each place. Rule now, my lord, and keep this city well. Reform abuses crept into the same. So shall your fame eternized be for aye, and London still preserved from decay. And I that do support the goldsmith's arms, which long in love to you have been united, will do my best to shadow you from harms, and find the means your loves may be requited.
And before we move on to the shorter elements, I mean, this feels very much like in the pageant 5 years ago. We have two people doing the opening sort of gambit rather than one. I don't know if that's a fair way of putting it, but they feel like the adults throat clearing before we get to the children. I don't know if that's fair. I quite like this. It's interesting that there's more of a you've got a job to do quality to this than the last one. It does sound like you've got to make sure that good things happen. It's not just a free ride. The merman speech I found quite bizarre. I quite like the unicorn one, but I'm not sure what was going on with the merman. Thoughts from the room.
Paid for by the Fish Marketing Board.
He was a member of the Fishmongers Guild.
Yeah.
Apparently. So
yeah, Liza.
I wonder if it was the figure of a merman and the actor was riding on it, or if it were just, say, for example, a fish tail that you could stand in and you could be seen down to the waist, and you could say, the opening few lines do sort of seem to indicate that the actor is talking about himself being a merman. Mark the tale I tell, whose form you see is monstrous, strange, and rare. So he might be talking about himself as a merman, rather than, hey, this is my awesome merman friend whom I'm riding on.
Other thoughts?
It does read like a bit of propaganda about the fishing guild, doesn't it? I'm just rereading it again. That kind of... Is it saying that you'd like... Are they hanging this all on the tenuous peg of keeping the Sabbath and not eating meat and eating fish, and this would do for the general good because then there'd be more things that come out of cows? And that's so bizarre.
What you don't get from Peele's shows is the sense of the kind of corporate civic interests, and you get that in all the others.
Right.
Peele is kind of at a remove, strangely, from all that. As you'll see for the next one, he gets very excited about the Queen, but they were expected to mention the company extensively. They were, after all, in the spotlight, and there's a lot of money at stake. So Yeah.
It's amazing. It's like a party political broadcast.
It's from the Fish Marketing Board, yes.
It's not as subtle as some of them are.
I mean, if they were written like that these days, I'd actually listen to them. I mean,
in the interval of the football, there's like 5 minutes of iambic pentameter telling you to eat more fish. I think now the goldsmiths seem to have paid for the unicorn, and they also seem to have. I would imagine that the pageant wagon seems to include a sun, and the sun might be gilded with like gold leaf. That would because they seem to make a lot of the sun in that one quatrain.
Yeah, the goldsmiths and the fishmongers were kind of celebrated for their amity. You get a fishmonger's show, the one that's illustrated 1616. Monday starts that one by saying how far back the friendship goes and all this kind of malarkey. So yeah, that's again, it would have really been expected.
Wear gold, eat fish.
Yeah.
And what's the symbolism of the unicorn there? Because weirdly, the unicorn is traditionally associated with the moon, is it not? And they're kind of putting up the golden sun. So to me, that's an antithetical. I mean, obviously these days it's associated with Scotland, which I guess long postdates this. But it's
you guys are a separate kingdom at this point.
Yeah.
But I think the unicorn might be associated with purity at this point. Ground
Farms has got unicorns on it.
Ah, yes. And ground unicorn horn was meant to prevent people poisoning your drink.
Okay.
Because the unicorn was so pure, you see. So yeah, as you say, it probably is just the goldsmith's arms, and I'm sticking with my idea of the sun as a massive gilded thing with that looks incredibly shiny and impressive.
Yeah, see no reason why not. We any additional thoughts before we go into what we shall call the children's section of the entertainment? Okay, similar fashion to last time, we'll go around the room. We'll start with Greg this time. If you could be fame, sounding a trumpet and saith.
The blessed peace which England doth possess, and so hath done this 32 years space, I fame am sent and charged to do no less. With trumpets sound, but spread it in each place, that all may wish with hearts which do not feign, our royal peace in England may still reign.
And Liza, peace of England, please.
I represent your peace, and chiefest good, that every hour doth pray for your defence. I sit as shadow for that royal blood whose life is pure, and still hath this pretence, that whilst she lives even with her heart and might, she seeks in peace for to defend your right.
And Alex, wisdom on one side supporting the state, saith.
Wisdom supporteth still the public state. Wisdom foreseeth ere it be too late.
Policy on the other side supporting the state, saith Tracey.
Yea, policy prevents each traitorous fact, and doth perform full many a famous act. Both policy and wisdom will not cease each night and day for to preserve this peace.
And Greg, God's truth, sir.
God's sacred truth, lo, here I represent, whom England's peace doth still maintain in place. I bring you comfort for your soul's content, which England's peace doth willingly embrace. And for her sake, by whom God's truth doth stand, the God of heaven doth bless this little land. Prudence and virtue shades our peace each day, chaste is her life, and therewith rests content. In vain delight she shuns to run astray, her virtues are most rare and excellent. Long may she live still to preserve this peace. Lord, still I pray her health and joys increase.
Liza, you are plenty.
This famous fleece doth so adorn our land, which daily doth with milk and honey flow, that fame doth make all nations understand, like peace and plenty never man did know. For wool and lead, for tin, corn, beer, and beef, of Christian nations England is the chief. Muse not to see This famous fleece doth stand upon a wool pack, fixed at Peace's feet. The reason is, as you may understand, worthy John Allot, for his place most meet, is Mayor of London and the Staple too, and will perform in both what he should do.
And Alex, you get to be loyalty and concord.
Faithful and loyal are her subjects seen. Concord unites them still in loyal bands. Their tender hearts is linked to our queen, and concord craves no other at their hands. Thus loyalty and concord doth agree, that London still therein shall famous be.
Tracey, ambition.
Or ambition still puffed up with hate and pride, doth daily seek to work sweet England's fall. He never rests, but seeks each time and tide, how England's peace might soon be brought in thrall, and commonwealths plunged into civil broils, that foreign foes might triumph in our spoils.
Greg, the Commonwealth.
Our Senate's grave and worthy magistrates shall endeavour to maintain our peace by banishing ambition from our gates and seeking means this peace may never cease. Yea, virtue so by him advanced shall be, that vice shall fly and not be seen in me.
And Liza, you get to be two people as well. You get to be science and labour.
Science still seeks those things we daily wish, and labour toils to bring us flesh and fish. Yea, science sure doth practice every day, that labour might keep England from decay. Science and labour still preserves man's health, and are chief props of this our Commonwealth.
And now we're dipping into history now, as Richard II pops in.
Help Walworth now to dant this rebel's pride. Ask what thou wilt, thou shalt not be denied.
And Tracey gets to be Jack Straw.
Jack Straw, the rebel, I present. Wat Tyler was my aid. Hob Carter and Tom Miller too. We all were not afraid, but to deprive our sovereign king, Richard II named. Yet for our bad ambitious minds by Walworth we were tamed. He being Lord Mayor of London then, soon danted all our pride. He slew me first, the rest soon fled, and then like traitors died, I think that is.
That should be died, yes. Walworth, it might not be. There's an interesting question about saying the Commonwealth, but you're clearly Walworth. So, Greg's, William Walworth, please.
I now present Sir William Walworth's place, a fishmonger and Mayor of London twice. I slew Jack Straw, who sought my king's disgrace, and for my act reaped honours of great price. First knight was I of London, you may read, and since each mayor gains knighthood by my deed. Yea, for that deed to London I did gain, this dagger here in arms given as you see. I won my company, this crest which doth remain, this to myself and my posterity. Thus did the king with honours me adore, and fame herself still laudeth me therefore.
And the final notes, it is to be understood that Sir William Walworth pointeth to the honours wherewith the king did endue him, which were placed near about him in the pageant. The first was the dagger given in the shield to the city of London. The second was the crest given to the company, namely 2 arms bearing up a crown. And the third was to the said Walworth and his posterity forever, 2 arms bearing up a millstone, showing thereby that the said Sir William Walworth performed a matter so impossible as it is for a man to hold up a millstone between his arms. Final text, Liza, time.
Time serves for all things. Time runneth fast. We crave your patience, for the time is past.
And that's all we have. And there's really interesting similarities and differences between what we had before and then here. You know, all the fame, peace. I think peace in England is quite a thing you're quite keen on in the 1590. Worrying about peace is about. And then we get to the sort of historical recreation moment, and going back to quite a famous chap, which we'll come to in a moment. But it's doing interesting things, and considering we were doing those sort of worthy things when we were looking at Coventry the other day, and that end bit with the king and the rebels feels sort of like in line with that, but also, yeah, it's a really interesting disjointed quality between all the fame and the science and labour stuff, and then that final bit with Richard II. Thoughts?
Yeah, it did seem more like this sort of. The earlier ones sort of seemed very classical. Everything about it, like the nymphs and the personification of the River Thames and what have you, it was sort of like we'd translate the whole New Troy, like linking it to Greece, which this seems to harp more on Christian nations. Like this is a Christian schema of morality. It's really weird that ambition kind of appears. Like again, if I'm reading this right, like a sort of pantomime villain going ha ha ha. I'm going to bring England down. And then suddenly it takes this sort of left turn into historical figures. It's sort of like everything in the kitchen sink's been thrown at this version.
It's also slightly, I hate to say cruder, but it's just they all come on and say, "I represent," in a way that feels more old-fashioned than what Peele was doing.
Yeah, and I also wondered, like, the wisdom thing, because it's only 2 lines, just in my head was a really small child who's been taught to say these 2 lines, and they're holding up the whole public stage. It was the youngest orphan in Annie in my head.
Well, I'm thinking, because wisdom gets 2 lines and then policy gets 4, but they're working together. I wonder if wisdom says 2, policy says 2, and then they both say the final 2.
Oh, yeah.
I just wonder about that. I don't know.
Yes, which loyalty and concord would then repeat, actually, if that was...
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly.
That makes sense. But you're absolutely right, because the latter you've got thus loyalty and concord doth agree, and then you've got both policy and wisdom will not cease. So that's really, I've never noticed that before. Well done, thank you.
Yeah, or they do it both in unison or not. I mean, it's or they decided in rehearsal.
I mean, actually, then science and labour do it later as well, don't they? There's 3 sets of little pairs. Science talks to labour, and then
1, 2, third, 1, 2, third, 1, 2, third. So it's every third time is a double act.
Clever, isn't it? What Tyler Woolworth thing is kind of standard trope, really. Woolworth was very famous, fishmonger Lord Mayor. I put up a picture of a virtually contemporary medieval picture of the Woolworth killing Wat Tyler. You can see on the left-hand side of that image. So he comes up, he features in all the fishmongers' pageantry.
It's interesting as well that Jack Straw. I mean, because we've done for the podcast a full cast audio adaptation of the life and death of Jack Straw, so this comes round well to us. But in that, you explicitly have all the characters: Jack Straw, Wat Tyler, Hobcarter, and Tom Miller too, with a play that's happening at around about the same time. So it feels like they're in conversation. In that sense, which way round or whether it's a circular loop, I don't know. But that depiction of all of that character, all of the characters, rather than just 1 or 2, seems intended, or seems logical.
I love it looks like a song lyric, the time bit at the end, and what I want to do is lift it out of here and put it as the finale song when we do Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yes, good minds.
Time is, time was. I think that's how it goes, isn't it? I can't remember. But yeah, message incoming from the big giant head. Well, that would throw in 2, theatrical crossovers into one text. I find interesting. So, any other thoughts? We've only got 1 more to do. We've got the following years. We're back to Peele. But any more on Nelson, as it were? I mean, it's It's sort of. I think you're right. It picks up on the mercantile element of things much more. It's much more ingratiating to the city, rather than the Queen. The first one was very queeny, and in a sense slightly simpler. But then maybe he was writing to the performers he was going to get, as well. Maybe there was a reason for that. I like all of that. Any more? No.
That's just that I think we're in a different political environment in 1590 versus 1584 as well. I think that's 85 rather. I think things are getting a bit more fraught. We're on the edge of a period of great dearth. There is a reference there to not having enough fleet. Obviously, Elizabeth's getting older. There's no heir. So yeah, it's getting a bit sticky. The 90s, I think. Obviously, we're back into the 80s again with the next year one, but I think there are certainly moments there where you're thinking, okay, so the Lord Mayor is not being expected to have an easy time of it.
Okay, let's nip ahead. It's the next year, so we get to compare one pageant to another. It's 1591. Descensus Astraeae. Help on the pronunciation later. And this is a device of a pageant born before M. William Webb, Mayor William Webb. Just spoiler alert, there may be some Webb puns coming up. What do we know about William Webb?
Not an awful lot. He was a salter, which was the same company as Peele and his father. So there's a kind of connection there. He's just a bog standard city oligarch, really. I don't think there's particularly interesting stuff about him, as far as I'm aware, anyway. Sorry, Mr. Webb. But his name's good for pageantry, obviously.
Right. Well, let's go to who's presumably still an adult opening the show. The presenter, Liza. Will you be our presenter, please?
See, lovely lords, and you, my lord, behold how time hath turned his restless wheel about, and made the silver moon and heaven's bright eye gallop the zodiac and end the year, whose revolution now begets anew the days that have created and confirmed a worthy governor. For London's good to underbear under his sovereign's sway unpartial justice been, and weaved a web. For your content and her command in all, you citizens of this metropolis, whose honour and whose oath to gratulate, lordings, behold what emblem I present. Astraea, daughter of the immortal Jove, great Jove, defender of this ancient town, descended of the Trojan Brutus line, offspring of that courageous, conquering king, whose pure renown hath pierced the world's large ears, in golden scrolls rolling about the heavens. Celestial sacred nymph that tends her flock with watchful eyes and keeps this fount in peace. Guarded with graces and with gracious trains, virtues divine and gifts incomparable, nor lets blind superstitious ignorance corrupt so pure a spring. O happy times, that do beget such calm and quiet days, where sheep and shepherd breathe in such content. Honour attends her throne, in her bright eyes sits majesty, virtue and steadfastness possess her heart, sweet mercy sways her sword. Her champion, armed with resolution, sits at her feet to chastise malcontents that threat her honour's rack, and time and kind produce her years to make them numberless, while fortune for her service and her sake with golden hands doth strengthen and enrich the web that they for fair Astraea weave. How long may she live, long may she govern us, in peace triumphant, fortunate in wars, our fair Astraea, our Pandora fair, our fair Eliza, our Zabetta fair, sweet Cynthia's darling, beauteous Cypria's peer, as dear to England and true English hearts as Pompey to the citizens of Rome, as merciful as Caesar in his might, as mighty as the Macedonian king or Trojan Hector, terror to the Greeks. Goddess live long, whose honours we advance. Strengthen thy neighbours, propagate thine own, guide well thy helm, lay thy anointed hand, to build the temple of triumphant truth, that while thy subjects draw thy peace from thee, thy friends, with aid of arms, may succoured be.
Yes, there's a bit more of a narrative thrust to this one. I think we should point out this is going somewhere, which is all going to tie in with other stuff. Always nice when they throw in a Trojan Brutus. Always like to hear back to our mythic past. It's all history. It's all real. And setting up again, like the earlier ones, the pageants that are to follow, the images and the additional speeches that are to come, setting up the plot to a degree. I think plot may be an excessive term, but the imagery that we're going to see. How did you find that, presenter?
Well, it was very lovely, and it certainly gave me a strong visual image of the pageant that must have accompanied it. There must have been people, actors, nymphs, representing all of these things, like blind, superstitious ignorance, probably sitting there with a blindfold, wondering how long the speech is going to be. Do you know, Tracey, how were these speeches meant to be repeated at intervals as the pageant wagon went to different places?
I'm not aware that they were actually, but probably not. No one's ever asked me that before. You can probably tell. It's a very interesting question. No, I don't think so. I mean, certainly, later on they tended to have static devices where nobody would have expected to hear the whole thing, so that way, apart from the mayor and his party.
And especially as this opening oration is very, and all of them I think have pretty much opened with "My Lord." It's very much he is the audience.
Yeah.
And hence the arse licking being quite strong in this one, I feel.
Well, the Virgin Queen's got to get her jollies somewhere. Astraeae was often a comparison drawn with Elizabeth. You get that a lot. I've certainly heard her referred to as Liza quite a bit, but never as Zabeta or Zabeta, from the second half of the name Elizabeth, of course. But I don't know if that name means anything. Elizabeth is from Hebrew Elisheva, which means God is my oath, or oath of God, or something like that. So I'm not sure if Zabeta or Zabeta has a meaning, or if the poet just wanted to stretch out a line.
Yeah, it sounded good. That's one I'm sure we can find out.
Cynthia's darling, Cynthia is the moon. Cypria's peer, Cypria is Venus, goddess of love. Bit of a bold move starting off with a comparison to Pompey, but then she also gets compared to Caesar and Alexander the Great and Hector of Troy. Basically, she's like all the worthies, all of them.
Yeah, well, of course she is. Other thoughts before we move on into the rest, and we'll go to almost the very end. We'll get to time again. Time's going to turn up. Return of time. After last year, obviously popular. Okay, Liza, I'll keep you as Astraeae, and we'll move on because there's some. You are very, very close in your estimation of what was going to happen. So I'm pleased.
Thank you. I apologize for not having a sheep or a sheep hook.
Oh, wow.
You guys can be the sheep. Oh, that's such a good sheep. I love that sheep. What is the sheep's name?
Her name is Smudge.
Smudge! I love you, Smudge. Sending remote scratches to little Smudge.
Cat steals the show again.
Yeah, it's you come for the early modern text, you stay for the cats. I'm used to it now. Anyway, Astraeae with her sheep hook on the top of the pageant.
Feed on, my flock, among the gladsome green, where heavenly nectar flows above the banks. Such pastures are not common to be seen. Pay to immortal Jove immortal thanks. For what is good from heaven's high throne doth fall, and heaven's great architect be praised for all.
Superstition, a friar sitting by the fountain. Superstition, Alex.
Stir, priest, and with thy beads poison this spring. I tell thee all is baneful that I bring.
Tracey, as ignorance, also not a friar, a priest this time.
It is in vain. Her eye keeps me in awe, whose heart is purely fixed on the law, the holy law. And bootless we contend, while this chaste nymph this fountain doth defend.
And Greg, Euphrosyne, I'm going with.
I'm glad I didn't have to say it. While on when Saturn's golden reign did cease, an iron age had kindled cruel wars, envy and wrath perturbing common peace, engendering cankered hate and bloody jars. Lo then, Olympus' king, the thundering Jove, wrought hence this gracious nymph Astraea fair. Now once again he sends her from above, descended through the sweet transparent air, and here she sits in beauty fresh and sheen, shadowing the person of a peerless queen.
And Egalia, Liza.
Aglaia, or Aglaia, a peerless queen, a royal princely dame, enrolled in register of eternal fame.
And Alex, Thalia.
The muse of comedy, isn't she?
Yes.
The graces throw their balm about her sacred head, whose government her realm's true happiness hath bred.
And Charity, Tracey.
That happiness continue in her land. Great Israel's God, spring of all heavenly peace, let thine angels to her rescue stand. With her life's wane done, England's joys decrease, but let her princely days never have fine, whose virtues are immortal and divine.
Greg, Hope.
Such virtues as her throne do beautify, and make her honours mount and scale the sky.
And I will read Faith, where hope of her eternal bliss doth rest, conceived in her sweet and sacred breast. Liza, Honour.
With radiant beams reflecting on the earth, even from the snowy brows of Albion, beyond the utmost verge of Christendom, as bright as is the burning lamp of heaven, shineth my mistress Honour, in whose fame the heathen carols sing and all admire, from icy Tanais to the sevenfold Nile, her glory that commands this western isle.
And Alex, you are champion.
In whose defence my colours I advance, and girt me with my sword and shake my lance. These British lions rampant in this field, that never learned in battle's rage to yield, breathe terror to the proud aspiring foe, ranging the world, commanding where they go. Therefore in vain this misproud malcontent threatens her state, whose harms the heavens prevent. Sit safe, sweet nymph, among thy harmless sheep, thy sacred person angels have in keep.
And Tracey, first malcontent.
What meaneth this? I strike and cannot strike. She is preserved by miracle belike. If so, then wherefore threaten we in vain that queen whose cause the gracious heavens maintain?
Greg, second malcontent.
No marvel then, although we faint and quail, for mighty is the truth and will prevail.
In the hinder part of the pageant did sit a child representing nature, holding in her hand a distaff and spinning a web, which passed through the hand of fortune and was wheeled up by time, who spake as followeth. Liza.
Thus, while my wheel with ever-turning gyres at heaven's high hest serves earthly men's desires, I wind the web that kind so well begins, while fortune doth enrich what nature spins.
And we'll just pause there before we go into the final speech that we have here. It's a good narrative of, Astraea's guarding the fountain, guarding the safe space. Superstition, ignorance. Various people want to get at it. Other people saying no, it's going to be great. It's got a nice dynamism to it as something that you can follow really quite straightforwardly, but it's got bits in it. It's interesting. I don't know if he's repeating this here or somewhere else, but we've got at least one Peele line that's from somewhere else. Snowy Brows of Albion, I recognise that well, Hunting of Cupid. And I wonder about Gladsome Green, that rings a bell from somewhere else as well. That might be more...
Will prevail as well. Mighty is the truth and will prevail as well. That crops up in one of the plays.
Yeah. So, is he recycling it for the pageants, or is he... Popular lines. Snowy Brows of Albion is something that for some reason has been stuck in my head for days, before I even noticed it was here. So I like that. So thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying. It's shifted again to something that has a bit more narrative content to it, or that it's a really interesting sort of like linear narrative, like, because obviously the characters don't really interact or repeat. It's like they're just a little chain of characters who all have a relationship to the next one on, which is quite pleasing. It's sort of weird that there's faith, hope and charity, but then we get sort of one of the muses thrown in, and then Euphrosyne, who I think was a grace as well as being a oh no, I'm wrong, sorry. According to Hesiod, Euphrosyne and her sisters Thalia and Aglaia were daughters of Zeus in the Oceania Eurydice, so I'm wrong. He is entirely right to include the three of those. I take it back. I withdraw it.
You were maligning Peele.
But you're absolutely right. Thalia was also the name of the muse of comedy, so you were right.
Yes, she's not very funny there, so she's having an off day if she is supposed to be muse of comedy.
It's all in the delivery.
Yeah. So yeah, spinning of a literal web for the thing for web. They're subtle. I love it.
It's nice as well in this one that there's, like in the first one, they didn't seem, everything was kind of milk and honey in the first one. And then in the second one, there was that sort of ambition character who sort of cackled in a corner but then did nothing. Whereas in this, there do seem to be, even though they're sort of staved off, like Tracey was saying earlier, more threats. There's the malcontents and the kind of poisonous well, and the kind of something outside is threatening to come in, which I didn't really get in the first one.
Yeah, you get this foreign friars. You expect them to be probably at this point Spanish.
He's poisoning the spring with his beads. That's like how anti-Catholic we're getting.
Yeah. Okay, we've got one tiny little bit left to go, which the question of placement here is interesting, because it looks to me, I think we've had this discussion before, Tracey, I don't know if you agree with me, I suspect you don't, but it says, a speech on the water delivered in the morning at my Lord Mayor's going to Westminster. So though we've read this last, it looks to me like this actually should live at the beginning. But that it just got printed here because it was separate. So this is another speech, possibly, from an entirely separate part of the day. Answers on a postcard debate at the end. Greg, I think it's your turn to do a horribly long speech. There you go.
List, gentle lords, and bubbling stream, be still, and whistling winds, your angry murmur cease. Let Thetis' nymph unfold the goddess's hest. Behold, embarked thus bravely as you see, laden with treasure and with precious ore, from where in Tellus' veins the parching sun doth gold and glittering minerals create, are come these strangers lovingly inflamed, to gratulate to you, my lovely lord, this gladsome day wherein your honours spring. And by the bar that thwarts this silver stream, even to the beauteous verge of Troy Noyant, that decks this Thamesis on either side, thus far these friends have pierced, and all by me salute your honour and your company. Thrice worthy praetor of this ancient town. The mortar of these walls, tempered in peace, yet holds the building sure, as are the sprigs woven from the spreading root in knotty box. Labour, fair lord, as other mayors of yore, to beautify this city with deserts. So, with these friendly strangers, man by man, pass with advisement to receive thy oath. Keep it inviolate for thy sovereign's hope, virtue's pure mirror, London's great mistress. And sheathe the sword committed to thy sway, with merciful regard of every cause. So go in peace, happy by sea and land, guided by grace and heaven's immortal hand.
And lo, we have run out of text for this session. I quite like the list to the bubbling stream and whistling winds your angry murmur cease. After a curry, that is a thought that I'm sure we have all had. Sorry, just lowering the tone there, I think, at the end of the session. Any thoughts about that, or for that matter, all of the pieces that we've done? We're very much into extra time. We've run a little later than planned, but general thoughts from the room about where we are.
And they're really fascinating to me because they're not really a form that I've ever explored before, and they're sort of weirdly dramatic and undramatic in strange ways. Like for me, actually, the most fascinating bit I think is the bit that's probably the worst written, which is the injunction not to eat fish on a Sabbath, because it's brilliant. It's just a bit of advertisement thrown in there amongst all of this, but done really, really interesting. I think because it sort of tells me something about society that I don't know at this point. Like, I'm impressed how much mileage that last one got out of what is a very static kind of form in some ways, like almost like a tableau vivant where people don't really interact and characters don't come back to one another, that actually the relationships it drew. But I think that the sort of the one that pleased me most in terms of poetry, maybe, and in terms of what it would mean to deliver that is probably the first one, the Peele one at the beginning. But it's really interesting putting those three in chronological order and seeing that Liza really interesting, because as I've confessed numerous times, my English history is my British history is terrible. Like Tracey said about the sort of gathering threat and things sort of slightly going downhill, that there is no air, and that sort of creeping darkness sort of coming in from outside. But yeah, they're really fascinating to me because they're not a form I know anything about, and I don't really know much about Lord Mayor's pageants and processions these days. But I don't think you get all this, do you? I don't think there's a lot of poetry speaking. It's more sort of like steel bands and dancers these days, isn't it? I don't know.
It is. It's yeah. All that's gone. Really, I was very disappointed the first time I saw one. Actually, I was expecting it to be pageantry as such, but 400 years later, but there wasn't.
It's really fascinating. I'm wondering if there's something you could do that would be a modern equivalent of this, and particularly I think that's why the Sabbath bit, I don't eat fish on the Sabbath, I love that it's sort of crammed in there cheek by jowl with these incredibly well turned out classical references and things.
Well, one of the hopes we've got is that as we go further into the later ones, where the form does develop and do lots of, in many ways, these are the simplest of the texts that we're looking at here.
Right.
There's a lot of development to come. And the other reason why I was looking at slightly different civic pageantry last time with, some medieval stuff was just the sense of a continuum, but also difference, and starting to build up that picture is exciting, he said.
I think that's what's interesting about this as well. It's sort of like reminded me of all these accounts you read of Greek theatre of like there was one person on the stage and then someone thought to put two people on the stage and have them talk together and then someone put a third one in, and actually what that must have done to the structure of drama. That this sort of reminded me slightly of kind of we're going towards building a narrative between the characters that we have on the stage. Yeah.
Liza, any final thoughts from you?
Well, firstly, that this is better poetry than I was expecting. or better writing in general than I was expecting. You know, it seems the guild guys paid enough to mostly get decent poets, and I hope they got good actors as well. And I hope everyone involved got paid really well, at least enough to drink and get some, I don't know, fish. And just a note about fish days. You're right, Alex, that it was a Sabbath thing, that it was a Friday thing, but fish day, there were a lot more fish days than that. All of Lent except Sundays were fish days, which I think is about 6 weeks, as is all of Advent, because you're supposed to starve yourself and deprive yourself before the blowout of Christmas. And there's a few other like penitential days where you're supposed to feel terrible about yourself and eat fish.
Wow.
And for some that's doing God's work, and for others it's a business opportunity, which this really shows. Greg, any final thoughts from you?
No, another fabulously interesting lot though.
And Tracey, we were Liza just briefly mentioned money, but people getting paid. It's a sense that the person who runs the show has to sort of bid, or put their tender in. Is that the best way of putting it? So it's a sort of job lot.
Yeah, it certainly becomes more like that in the 17th century. I mean, generally speaking, you get little sort of creative teams pitching to the companies, delivery companies, and they will kind of knock them down a bit. They get quite a lot of money. I mean, it compares extremely well to what you get for writing a play for the playhouses. But of course, a lot of that is subcontracted out to, people doing costumes and so on, and buying the children breakfast and stuff. But it probably still was quite lucrative, and it was certainly very prestigious. It's such a massive event.
Mm.
Yeah.
And one of the other final things is to note is we're not really sure who the printing of these pageants was for.
No.
Why we have these pageants. It's not quite clear precisely who they were printed for or why they gave it a bid.
There's the courtesy to tell us, in the period, like, of course we did this because of this, and but they didn't. So this is the question. It's always the question. Were they printed in large numbers? Probably not. A couple of hundred, maybe 400. Were they handed out on the day? Quite probably. Were they used as programs? Possibly. Were they souvenirs? Possibly. They don't survive in any great numbers. But yeah, it's. I only think that possibly the answer is that it varied. Bit of a cop out, but I think that's probably what will happen.
Well, I'm guessing the market for them might have been people who were, for example, people who were present but not within sight of the pageants, but not within hearing of the speakers. You could have your hawker outside St. Paul's or wherever the booksellers were. You could have your hawker with a basket of these going.
Yeah, I think somebody made a very good point to me at a conference once, that if you bring home a program for a theatre performance or something, you're not likely to look at it again. You're just going to sort of stash it, So I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, there's not much evidence that anybody sort of commented on their copies or anything like that. Or they start getting collected, but later into the 17th century, people start collecting them, and they categorise in all sorts of different ways, which is very interesting. Clearly, but people did regard them as being political, even if it's only very low-scale political, and also be dramatic. So we've seen both of those two things very strongly, I think, tonight. It's really good.
Yes, and as we go into the 17th century, which we will be sometime anon, we will see. We do have quite a good selection that survived from there. We don't have many from this is basically it for the 16th century, but we do a lot better and a lot longer in some cases as well. There's a lot more text for.
Right.
So, unless anyone has any final thoughts, I will close by thanking everyone for reading today, and we will return. There will be more civic pageantry sometime in the future. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye.